Welcome to this exploration of triangle pose together. Let me set some ground rules to begin with. These movement explorations aren't a taught practice in the sense that I'm not going to be asking you necessarily to do specific things. I'm going to be giving you ideas to play with and explore. So although there will be a lot of guidance, there won't be anything you absolutely have to do. The idea is that you engage with the suggestions in the way that makes sense to you, and find your own way to explore this material together. In other words, there isn't a right or a wrong way to do this practice. In fact, the very idea of right and wrong ways to do things is going to be what we explore together. That being said, because we are playing with triangle pose, you might want to think about what you're wearing, whether you want a mat or not, that kind of thing. I'm going to be assuming that you have some familiarity with standing poses in yoga to do this pose, to do this exploration today. If you're not 100% sure, you might want to pause this recording and go and look up some photos of what triangle pose looks like, just to remind yourself if you're a real beginner. But many of you, I think, are going to be experienced practitioners who've done triangle pose many, many times before. Also, if you decide you really need to warm up a bit before we begin, please feel free to pause this recording and go and do that also. So if you're ready, you might want to take a little moment. You can sit or stand whilst I tell you the context for this, why I'm choosing to do this today. Many years ago, I was taught this version of triangle pose and it was taught to me as Angela Farmer's version of triangle pose. Now, although I have studied with Angela, I haven't done triangle pose with her. This is entirely consistent with the way she teaches, so I can absolutely imagine that this is indeed how she did it. So, if you haven't come across this way of doing triangle pose before, it's a lot of fun and it's really interesting. But it's also in the context for me of triangle pose more generally, which I think is a really interesting pose in the development of modern yoga. When modern yoga develops, one of the things that we start to see is the idea of this kind of geometric aesthetics that comes in, something that we start to call alignment. In other words, that arms should be straight and hips should face in certain directions, and things have nice kind of clean angles, as there are straight lines and right angles and so on and so forth throughout the postural practice. And there's a sense that this develops possibly at the same time as people start to use photography to kind of think about posture more generally, and at the time when we start to be getting a lot of photos of yoga poses for the first time. Now, I'm not going to go into that development too deeply, but I want you to imagine that this is really the first time that we start to think about there being right and wrong angles, right and wrong ways to align the body. And we start already to get this slippage between things being good for the body and things being aesthetically aligned. Right? So the first thing I'm going to invite you to do, if you'd like to, is to do what you might consider or you might feel in your body as a traditional triangle pose. Perhaps as you were taught it yourself as a beginner, how were you talked into that posture, or how do you talk other people into that posture? Maybe you start sideways from a wide-legged position, turning one foot out, taking the arms out to horizontal, pausing for a moment, and then tilting the torso so that one arm comes down towards the turned out foot and the other arm goes towards the ceiling. Maybe you've been taught to approach it slightly differently. Maybe you come from the front of your mat, step one leg back and turn the back hip out and the back foot out. Maybe you come from more of a lunge position first, more of a side angle pose or something like that, and then straighten the front leg into triangle pose. What are the various ways you've been instructed into the position? Can you play with them a little bit here yourself? Take a few moments on each side as you're doing it to say, oh yeah, this is how I get into this position. And then there's a couple of things I'm going to invite you to explore. One is, what are the kinds of experiences you've had in triangle pose? It's a posture that has some difficulty to it, in that for most people there is a certain even minor impossibility in keeping the hips pointing in one direction, the shoulders stacked one on top of the other, the arms vertical. It's not an easy pose. It's kind of deceptive. As you're doing that, you might be thinking about some of the modifications and changes you make to the pose, or you encourage students to make to the pose, maybe using a block under the one hand, or leaning against the wall. Like, how do you explore, and how have other teachers helped you explore this pose in the past? And again, every so often, just pause, step out, maybe shake it off, take a moment, move to the other side, and try then. Kind of listen to your body and how far it wants to move today. Maybe you have certain kind of key alignment cues that are favorites of yours, that you've heard or that you use, in terms of maybe drawing the front hip back or turning the tailbone under a little bit. You know, what kinds of cues help you explore this pose? So what kind of modifications help make the pose easier and more accessible on the one hand, and on the other hand, what are the kind of cues that help take students deeper and further into this triangular shape, this series of triangles in the body? There's no rush and no hurry. When you're ready to, bringing that to a close, having a bit of a stretch and a wriggle, maybe doing something else in the body for a moment. Maybe you want to take the arms up, have a nice long stretch, maybe even a little sigh and a wriggle. Then let me tell you a very different way of doing triangle pose. And this again is it's been passed down from teacher to teacher, from Angela Farmer outwards into the world. So we have to kind of acknowledge that source for this particular story. What I want you to do is, if you're still on a mat, if you are on a mat to begin with, then maybe face the short end of your mat, forwards end of your mat, and maybe start at the back. At any rate, what I'm going to invite you to do is to imagine you're walking forwards. You're walking along a street. And as part of that walking forwards, pause for a moment and imagine that down on the ground in front of you is something unusual, maybe something small and shiny, something quite attractive, but you're not quite sure what it is. You're going to step 1 foot forwards towards it. You'll notice that this is a movement that's very intentional, but it's not a movement that's about shape. It's not about making a particular shape with the body. You're just stepping 1 foot forwards. So can you maybe resist the urge to step forwards a certain amount, or achieve a particular alignment or experience in the hips, and just step 1 foot forwards? For argument's sake, let's say it's the right foot, but you can use either. It doesn't matter. In fact, I'm going to encourage you to do both. But let's imagine you step the right foot forwards. Can you lean forwards, bend forwards over that right leg? Now, as you're doing this, the right leg's kind of relatively straight, but there's nothing, it isn't a straightened leg. It's just not bent, you know? Everything's quite soft, quite loose, quite organic. As you bend forwards over that front leg, that right leg, maybe you reach the fingertips of your right hand down towards this shiny object to pick it up. There it is on the ground in front of you, and you can pause for a moment with one hand on the floor. How much do you need to bend the knees or curl the torso to make that happen? What's the way of reaching down for that object that has ease to it rather than precision? And you're still not entirely sure what this thing is. And you don't want to bring it too close to your face, but you do want to see it better. So maybe, here's an idea. So maybe, here's an idea. You could swap the object from your right hand to your left, so that's the front hand, to the top hand, and take it up past your face, up towards the light, up towards the sunlight. So that here you are, with one arm gently resting on your forward stepped foot, the other arm gently reaching towards the sunlight, and you balanced in the middle. Might this be a very different version of triangle pose? Take a moment to feel into it, to explore it, maybe even to wriggle within it. Now there's no rush and no hurry to let the top arm release down, to gently uncurl and step forwards or back, to come out of the pose. How does it feel in your body? Does it feel different? And then in your own time, you're going to do exactly the same on the other side, not least because the repetition kind of really helps us learn the lessons, I think, of movement practice. So again, perhaps from the back of your mat, if you're on your mat, or with a little space in front of you of some kind, you're going to step forwards with the other foot. Now, if you started with the right, this would then be the left, but it doesn't really matter so long as you're on the opposite foot. You're stepping forwards and bending over again to see that imaginary object on the ground in front of you. What do you need to bend? What do you need to curl? What do you need to adjust in the body to make it easier to bend forwards and to reach down with the same side hand as the foot that stepped forwards? Left foot forwards, left hand forwards, or vice versa. Taking a moment to make sure that curl forwards, that bend forwards is nice and easy, even with the legs apart, with one foot forwards and one foot back. Take the object and just swap it. This imaginary object, swap it from one hand to the other, leaving that front arm, the left arm, to gently rest on your front leg, taking the other arm up past the face, up towards the sunlight, to see if you can see that object more clearly. And the gaze follows the arm as it lifts, but everything has an ease to it, a kind of organic feel to it, feeling like the body isn't being forced. It is finding the most efficient, the most easeful way to achieve a certain thing. Take a moment in this version of the pose on this side. Enjoy it, maybe wriggle within it. A couple more breaths, no rush, no hurry. And then whenever you're ready, letting the top hand release back down, gently uncurling and stepping forwards or backwards until you're back in a kind of fairly standard standing position, taking a little moment to shake it off. See how it feels in your body to move from a point of intention rather than a point of precision. So rather than attempting to make a particular shape, what happens if we find the story that helps our body get to a place? So rather than this arm is straight and that leg is bent or whatever it might be, it's how are we achieving the thing? How are we moving through space in ways that the body can easily align behind? Now, I don't want to suggest that this is the only way to do practice, but if you haven't explored working somatically like this before, you might want to take a few moments. You might want to pause this recording and go and explore other postures in a similar way. How would it be to explore, I don't know, chair pose as if you were actually going to be sitting backwards in a chair, or warrior two, as if you were just trying to be in a more fluid place, like you were surfing on a surfboard? Or, can you do archer's pose, as if you were actually drawing a bow? What does it mean? How does it change the practice to be working from intention rather than from a place of wanting a particular precision or alignment? But for those of you who are used to working somatically, and for those of you who've been off explored, come back again, I want to invite you back towards that first version of triangle pose. Just for a moment. And ask yourself why it might be useful to do the more unusual, more difficult version, the more traditionally taught version of the pose. My invitation to you to consider is that sometimes it's interesting to make particular shapes with the body, to reach for certain kinds of alignment, not because they're inherently better for you, not because they're inherently more spiritual or enlightened, but because it's interesting to see if you can do them. I think this is even more true with something like Warrior 2. So if you wanted to take a moment to explore either a Warrior 2 pose, so that would mean starting from a wide leg standing position, taking the arms wide to the side, and then turning one foot out and bending that knee, and taking the hips forwards towards that bent knee, even as you're reaching one hand forwards and one hand back. Now, what we tend to teach from an alignment perspective in a Warrior 2 is that the back leg is straight and the front knee is bent at kind of a right angle and the arms are horizontal. I want you to consider, as you're exploring that idea here, as you're seeing how it feels in the body, that the point is not that those points of alignment are inherently better for you. It's to know, do you have the somatic literacy? Do you have the understanding of your own body to know where horizontal is? What a right angle feels like in the body? Can you ask your body to do particular things? So that even if it says, nah, not today, the front knee is not feeling it, or whatever else it might be, that you still know what that looks like, what that feels like. If you are exploring Warrior 2, again, do make sure that you're playing on both sides, just to explore the differences between right and left as much as anything else. And there's no rush, no hurry, again, here to explore in your own time. Again, starting from a wide-legged position, taking the arms nice and wide and horizontal, turning the other foot out now, bending that knee towards horizontal, and keeping one arm forwards, one hand back as you turn your nose, at least, towards the extended bent knee. How does complexity feel in the body when you're trying to do very different things with different parts of the body? It's not just the physical load or the physical experience being different, it's also the mental experience is different of trying to do all these different things at once, rather than simply paying attention to the most everyday mundane of movements, of bending forwards and picking something up. Now, this is a short exploration. We've been just 20 minutes here. What I really want you to do is to, again, pause this recording and go and play with your practice in a way that allows you to take this further for you. So you might continue to explore different standing poses and explore them again in terms of alignment and then in terms of a kind of softer, more organic experience, posture. Not thinking about one being better than the other, but about the two giving you different experiences and therefore teaching us different things about the body as a result. Again, I would strongly suggest you pause this recording, you go and do that, and then we're going to come back and we'll take I'll kind of round things up for us. So feel free to pause now, or if you're happy with a shorter practice today, please feel free to just continue to listen. There's no rush again and no hurry. But my final invitation to you today is to find a position that's comfortable to meditate in, to take a moment of contemplation. So there might be a particular kind of cross-legged seated position that really works for you. There might be particular props you like to sit on, or you like to lean against the wall. Or you might like to lie down. We're only going to be a few minutes, and if you're not too tired, sometimes the nicest position for the spine to be in is flat on the floor. Whatever position you choose, my only real condition, if it's okay with you, is to try and make sure that the spine is straight in whatever orientation it is. And then let's explore what we mean by straight. With no rush and no hurry, moving if you need to, but setting the intention for stillness. I invite you to experience the flow of breath up and down the spine. What I mean by that is, on the inhale, feeling your awareness rise to the top of the top of the skull, and then the exhale all the way back down to the tailbone. Now, one important caveat: if it's not comfortable or useful for you to be exploring from the point of view of the breath today, just find any other rhythm that's working for you, kind of rising up and down the spine in any rhythm that's working. The idea is that it's a kind of slow, steady rhythm. To begin with, then, can we sit with the idea of a straight line up and down the spine? No rush, no hurry, up and down the spine. And then the next time you start at the tip of the tailbone, let's try and put some curves into that straight spine. And I don't mean adding them, I mean really feeling the way that the tailbone actually tucks under, so that as you come up, you're actually going backwards. You kind of scoop in towards the lower back. You reach backwards with the spine, around the ribs and the shoulders. You scoop in again at the back of the neck, and then there's the outward curve of the skull all the way up to the crown of the head. Going the other way, from the crown of the head, you kind of curl backwards and out, and then scoop in at the back of the neck, out around the shoulders and the ribs, and then scoop in at the lower back, out around the buttocks and the tailbone, scooping back in again. As I'm sure you're already aware, the spine is a series of curves. Not only that, but those curves are moving as the body settles, fidgets, as it's moved by the breath. But there's a more organic sense of curls and curves in the spine as a whole, and we could get really detailed about that. We could think about each and every spinal process, each and every little bump, if you like, along the spine. How subtle can your awareness be of those ever-evolving, ever-moving curves in the spine? And then there's no rush and no hurry when you're ready to, going back to just simply coming up and down. Kind of a straight line. It's not that one is right or one is wrong and one is wrong. It's not that one is accurate and one is not. It's two different ways of experiencing the body. two ways of moving. I just encourage you to sit for a few minutes here with the one that's giving you the most interesting experience today. No rush and no hurry. I'm going to bring this recording to an end now. We've been here about 25 minutes all told, with whatever breaks you've taken as well. You're welcome to continue to meditate, to rest, to do whatever makes sense for you to bring your practice to an end today. I hope you've enjoyed this little exploration. Thank you.